$13 billion, a mind-boggling sum that is impossible to ignore, especially when it comes to the realm of gaming consoles. If someone had told you just a few short years ago that the PlayStation 5 would achieve more profit than all its legendary predecessors combined, you might have laughed it off as a wild fantasy. But here we are, standing on the precipice of a brand new era, where the unthinkable is suddenly a documented reality. Today, we will dissect exactly how this astonishing financial feat came about, why it is rattling the industry, and what it means for the future of console gaming. Is it merely a product of changing technologies, or does it herald a more profound shift in how we consume and value entertainment? Buckle up, because we are diving straight into one of the most remarkable stories to come out of the gaming world. In this episode, our focus is clear. We are setting our sights on that eye-watering $13 billion of operating income generated by the PlayStation 5. We will look back on the earlier generations of PlayStation, from the very first console that set Sony on the map, through to the era of the PlayStation 4. We are going to ask tough questions. What are the biggest reasons behind this dramatic surge, and how much of it can be attributed to modern trends like microtransactions, live service titles, and the digitalization of gaming revenue streams? We will also explore some surprising discussions around continued sales of older consoles, such as the large user base for the PlayStation 4 that still lingers even while the PlayStation 5 claims its place at the top. Finally, we will shine a bright light on the future. If the current wave of digital monetization continues to rise, what can we expect to see in 5 or 10 years? In the course of this exploration, we will cover several key mysteries and revelations. We will uncover why gamers are both delighted and uneasy about the escalating emphasis on live service games. We will tackle the phenomenon of microtransactions, how a tiny purchase repeated millions of times can balloon into a massive revenue stream. We will pose urgent questions about whether the industry's pivot to digital distribution is truly an opportunity or a potential trap. Are we looking at a brave new world of ever-expanding choice, or might we be drifting into an era of price hikes and endless add-ons? And beneath it all, we will unravel exactly how one single device can outprofit 4 entire console generations. Ready to dig in? Let us start by revisiting an apparently straightforward but deeply consequential series of numbers. The data is as follows. During the original PlayStation era, Sony turned a net operating income of approximately $3 billion. When the PlayStation 2 took the crown, the total was about $2 billion. Then came the colossal challenge of the PlayStation 3 era, where costs soared, and the entire generation ended up posting a substantial loss of about $4 billion. Finally, the PlayStation 4 era proved to be a comeback story, bringing in around $9 billion. If we stack these eras on top of one another, from the mid-1990s all the way through the late 2010s, it totals about $10 billion in operating profit across 4 entire generations of consoles. By comparison, the PlayStation 5 has, according to these statistics, already netted around $13 billion. This is well above the combined $10 billion historically credited to the older devices. At first glance, that number alone is enough to raise eyebrows, provoke gasps, and maybe a bit of suspicion. Have gaming habits really shifted so drastically in just a few short years? What changed? Are fans truly spending so much more nowadays, or has the environment of entertainment and technology undergone a massive transformation that affects how we measure and evaluate success? The answer undoubtedly involves a jigsaw puzzle of factors. From the unstoppable rise of digital storefronts to the explosive popularity of free-to-play juggernauts that rake in massive microtransaction revenue, each facet of modern gaming contributes to this financial masterpiece. Yet one point that people hasten to bring up is the role of timing and categorization. Sony's recent investor presentation groups these results by generation, but one could argue that the data lumps together revenue generated by the PlayStation 4 during the PlayStation 5's lifespan, simply because both overlap in the same range of years. It is not as though the 4th console ceased to exist the moment the 5th one launched. Large numbers of people remain content on older hardware due to game availability, personal budgets, or simply waiting for hardware restocks. So, a question emerges. Are we actually looking at pure PlayStation 5 profit? Or is it a blend of income from the entire ecosystem of Sony's console family that just happens to fall under the umbrella of the PlayStation 5 generation? As we will see, this is not a mere technical quibble. It highlights the modern-day complexity of console transitions. But let us not forget the matter of inflation. The industry today is drastically different from what it was in the 1990s or early 2000s. The cost of gaming has ballooned, ranging from the hardware production side all the way down to subscription fees, digital storefront commissions, and microtransactions. Many kinds of games simply did not exist when the original PlayStation was in its heyday. Players spent money differently, with fewer expansions and far less in the way of post-launch add-on costs. So, when we try to read these figures across decades, we must take into account that $1 in the mid-1990s was worth more than it is in the mid-2020s. And yet, even if we adjust for inflation, it is clear that gaming has metamorphosed. It is not merely a question of bigger budgets or higher hardware prices. It is a whole new paradigm of how companies monetize fun, how players consume content, and how the lines between console generations blur. Today, many of us buy games digitally, with zero packaging or physical presence at all. We subscribe to services, from monthly platform memberships to cloud gaming offerings, or sign up for expansions that run on seasonal cycles. At each turn, Sony is well positioned to collect a portion of that transaction. Now, let us talk about the business dimension that is often overshadowed by the brightness of blockbuster releases: the critical stream of revenue from live service games and microtransactions. Most famously, titles such as Fortnite and Genshin Impact have minted extraordinary profits through the sale of skins, gear, and other optional in-game goodies. Perhaps even more noteworthy are the powerhouse releases like Call of Duty, which can generate enormous sums of money far beyond the initial purchase of the base game. Every time a player buys a cosmetic item or a season pass through the PlayStation Store, Sony claims a percentage. And how big is this chunk of change? From the vantage point of an outside observer, it is enormous. If we multiply small purchases by millions of players, day after day, across multiple games, the result is a tidal wave of revenue that dwarfs older models of game sales. The industry has learned that there is no single end to a game's profit cycle. Instead, there are new expansions, new cosmetic packs, new microtransactions, and entire esports ecosystems that drive loyal fans to keep spending. For many, this is a fair trade. The game is perpetually fresh, updated with new modes, new characters, and new challenges. But for some gamers who recall a simpler time, microtransactions are seen as an ominous shift toward pay-to-look cool or pay-to-boost mechanics that they fear might overshadow pure gameplay. This, of course, brings us to the topic of how Sony sees its place in a world dominated by digital revenue. According to reports and investor data, over half of all revenue in the PlayStation Store funnel originates within a relatively small handful of massive titles. Among them, EA Sports FC 25, NBA 2K25, and Grand Theft Auto 5. These games serve as endless sources of microtransaction potential, from ultimate team packs to exclusive gear releases that entice players to keep engaging and keep paying. Of course, for Sony, who receives 30% on each purchase made through its ecosystem, this arrangement is highly attractive. We also see a deeper explanation of why Sony itself might want to develop its own successful live service juggernaut. Right now, the company sees how profitable a well-constructed microtransaction framework can be when it is run on the PlayStation platform. If only they could fully replicate that success in a proprietary brand, they would receive, to put it bluntly, 100% of each user's spending. It is the same dream that every publisher has. Build a title so compelling and so sticky in its design that players flock to it, not just for a few weeks, but for years, spending money on new content and expansions like clockwork. But can Sony replicate the phenomenon of a Fortnite or a Call of Duty with a first-party game? That is the question that will define whether the next wave of Sony properties can stand shoulder to shoulder with the most profitable juggernauts on the market. Yet, as we unravel these points, there is a sense of tension that we cannot ignore. On one hand, gamers certainly enjoy the bigger budgets for blockbuster exclusives, more intricate online infrastructures, and deeper, more expansive updates to their favorite franchises. On the other hand, there is a widespread concern that too much focus on monetization twists the original spirit of gaming into something unrecognizable, as though, in chasing revenue, companies might lose sight of the artistry and innovation that once fueled the entire gaming culture. How do we draw that line to preserve the soul of gaming while also accepting that studios need to rake in healthy profits to keep pushing boundaries. If we look back at the older generations with a nostalgic eye, we see a more straightforward time, or so it might seem from a distance. The PlayStation 1 era largely revolved around single-purchase titles. Yes, expansions and spin-off releases existed, but the digital marketplace was still in its infancy. The PlayStation 2 exploded in popularity, becoming a veritable legend among gaming consoles. Yet the hardware was sold at times at or near a loss, with Sony making a profit primarily from licensed game sales. When the PlayStation 3 arrived, development costs skyrocketed. That entire generation was rife with complicated hardware architecture that developers struggled to optimize. With the lost $4 billion overshadowing that era, Sony eventually regrouped and rebounded with the successful launch of the PlayStation 4, forging a foundation for the robust digital ecosystem we see today. The success we are witnessing with the PlayStation 5 is thus not just about hardware. Clearly, the console features advanced computing power, an improved controller experience, and some breathtaking exclusive titles. But from a purely financial vantage point, the console's real edge is the network of digital business models that revolve around it. This includes subscription services like the updated tiers of PlayStation Plus, layered with free monthly titles and additional perks that keep subscribers tethered to the platform. It also encompasses the unstoppable force that is microtransactions, as well as the potential for cross-generational play that entices owners of older consoles to continue making purchases that credit the overall PlayStation ecosystem. One might wonder if numbers like $13 billion are sustainable. Is there a ceiling to this growth, or could the next 5 to 10 years deliver even more jaw-dropping headlines? With each new quarter, we see further experimentation, tiered subscription models, expansions of cloud gaming, and ambitious attempts to unify gaming communities around a single ecosystem. Sony is not alone in testing these waters. Other major industry players look to replicate success with their own live service titles, especially as free-to-play games become a magnet for massive user bases around the world. Yet, the question remains, will these revenue shifts dramatically reshape how we define a successful console generation? Now, for the big question, how might these revelations about the PlayStation 5's profits affect everyday gamers? A portion of the audience might say, well, as long as the games remain fun and high quality, I do not mind a little extra monetization. Others might worry that this signals a future riddled with microtransactions that overshadow the base experience. Then there is the question of older hardware. With so many people still enjoying the PlayStation 4, does Sony risk leaving them behind, or will the cross-generational approach continue to thrive as a means of bridging consumer bases and generating more revenue? If you are as fascinated by these industry twists as we are, take a moment to support our endeavor. If you have been enjoying the discussion so far and want to see more deep dives, go ahead and consider throwing a like our way. It not only helps keep the conversation alive, but also keeps you in the loop for future stories that delve into the business and culture shaping the consoles you love. But let us keep our momentum. Imagine a future scenario in which the cost of producing a single big-budget game starts pushing the boundaries of $500 million. This might sound improbable now, but seen through the lens of inflation and the rising desire for photorealistic gameplay, it may not be far-fetched. Would the console manufacturer or publisher have any choice but to recoup costs through microtransactions, cosmetic content, or expansions that keep players financially engaged over an extended period? The more money it takes to create that show-stopping experience, the more necessary it becomes to generate recurring revenue in ways that used to be considered optional or peripheral. Meanwhile, the historical perspective shows us a cycle. With the PlayStation 3, Sony overshot its hardware ambitions and faced a painful financial fallout. With the PlayStation 4, it recalibrated, soared to new heights, and built a robust digital marketplace that fully reimagined the ways that revenue could be garnered. By the time the PlayStation 5 arrived, the stage was set for a generation that was no longer just about bigger, more beautiful games, but about harnessing the unstoppable might of online transactions, live service expansions, and an ever-broadening subscription model. As we pivot to examine precisely which companies or titles are feeding this giant beast, we find that the biggest contributors are often the usual suspects, from the unstoppable tidal wave of Fortnite to the dependable juggernaut of Call of Duty. Genshin Impact also takes its share, thanks to a fervent fanbase and a stream of new characters, story content, and cosmetic items that continuously refresh the gameplay experience. The exact formula varies from title to title, but the blueprint is universally understood. A free or low-entry cost game that is easy to pick up, combined with an in-game shop that offers items players simply must have. Succeed there, and you have a potential goldmine. Driven by that success, Sony's strategic planning slides reflect a hunger to replicate those results internally. Clearly, the publisher would prefer to have its own blockbuster property that soars to the #1 spot on the bestseller list of microtransactions. And you can see why. The difference between receiving a fraction of each purchase and receiving almost the entire purchase is monumental. Yet it is also a risky proposition. The gaming community can be fickle, notoriously suspicious of corporate meddling in their favorite hobby. If it feels like a quick cash grab, the blowback might be intense. We have seen other publishers face backlash from fans who disapprove of aggressive monetization schemes. On the other hand, if a developer crafts a genuinely compelling experience that justifies its ongoing transactions, fans might embrace it wholeheartedly. All this begs the question, is Sony unstoppable at this point, or are there unforeseen stumbling blocks that might cause a downward shift? Right now, the future looks bright for the PlayStation 5. Demand for the hardware remains high, and as the technology matures, we can expect to see even more advanced titles that leverage the console's capabilities. The game catalog will only widen, eventually diminishing the reliance on PlayStation 4 revenue streams. Meanwhile, the focus on subscription services grows ever sharper, forging ties with players who can be converted and retained for years. That is a major difference from earlier console cycles, when your primary engagement was the purchase of a physical disc. Some skeptics argue that these staggering revenue numbers are a temporary upswing, partially inflated by an era of global events that kept more people at home and more eager for digital entertainment. Others say that we have not even begun to see the real potential for growth, if Sony invests heavily in new studios and exclusive titles that will drive brand loyalty further. As we stand here, the big question is not merely, how did Sony manage this, but where do we go from here? The gaming landscape is so volatile, so dynamic, that a single new trend, like cloud-native gaming, could overhaul the entire approach to hardware and software revenue in the next few years. And let us not discount the emotional side of the story. The PlayStation brand has an undeniable history of forging deep connections with players, from the days of Final Fantasy on the PlayStation 1 to the massive open-world sagas on the PlayStation 4. Sony's trajectory has always been buoyed by iconic exclusives, dedicated fan communities, and the overall sense that every new generation promises to push the boundaries of interactive storytelling. Can you imagine what the next wave of marquee titles might look like as developers get deeper into harnessing the raw power of these modern machines, or as the envelope is pushed for new forms of online connectivity? At this point, let us take a brief pause to remind you that if you find these kinds of detailed breakdowns valuable, consider subscribing for more content like this in the future. These discussions are fueled by your curiosity and enthusiasm, so each extra bit of support goes a long way in ensuring we can continue shedding light on the ins and outs of the gaming industry. We have touched on microtransactions, live services, subscriptions, historical comparisons, and the subtle interplay between old and new consoles. One of the most fascinating takeaways is how crucial it has become for companies to maintain a relationship with the consumer that extends well beyond a single purchase. The idea of games as a service could have been laughed off decades ago, but now it is a near-universal business model. As a result, an astonishing portion of console-related profit is anchored in consistent spending, not just unit sales. Underpinning all this progress and transformation, Sony's leadership likely envisions a future in which the next big step is almost intangible. By intangible, we mean experiences that morph from static disc-based releases into living platforms that constantly evolve. Imagine a scenario in which a single game has multiple arcs across a span of 5 or more years, each new arc sold as a micro-event or subscription-based expansion. Imagine your gaming console not just as a box, but as an always-on portal to a curated set of evolving worlds. That is the direction the industry hints we are headed, and for better or worse, Sony's success with the PlayStation 5 might confirm that is the trend. As we glide toward our conclusion, we should circle back to that original, jaw-dropping revelation that opened this entire discussion. The PlayStation 5, in only a fraction of the time, raked in more operating profit than all four earlier generations combined. It is a testament to how swiftly the landscape can change when acumen in digital distribution, robust network infrastructure, and consumer enthusiasm intersect. It is also a reflection of the unstoppable march of technology. Yet for all the debate around inflation, cross-generation revenue, or the ethics of microtransactions, the fact remains that Sony has tapped into a goldmine with the PlayStation 5. In the short term, that can lead to bigger, bolder investments, higher-profile exclusives, and an unprecedented growth in the user base. Long term, we will see how it shapes the deeper fabric of gaming culture. Will the art of single-player experiences survive amid the clamor for revenue-driving multiplayer expansions? Will indie developers embrace or resist microtransactions? Might new forms of consumer backlash appear if monetization becomes too aggressive? These questions surface whenever we see a boom on this scale. The only certainty is that the industry will continue evolving, and with Sony at the forefront, we can expect this conversation to remain hotly debated for years to come. Thank you for journeying through this in-depth exploration of what might be one of the most significant gaming milestones of the 21st century. The next time you power on your console to enjoy the latest installment of your favorite franchise, spare a thought for the massive network of transactions, revenue streams, and corporate strategies humming in the background. The era of the PlayStation 5 is shaping up to be record-breaking, but the story has only just begun. Brace yourself for whatever epic changes the gaming world has in store, because if history has taught us anything, it is that the next generation will push boundaries further, reach deeper into our wallets, but also give us breathtaking new ways to be entertained.